Nobody in the Galactic Union could agree on much, but every species agreed on one thing. Verdant 6 was a death trap. The planet had earned its quarantine status 200 years ago, and no council had ever considered lifting it. Ambassador Holith remembered the old footage. She had watched it as a young kid during her training at the Diplomatic Academy. The screaming, the running, the blood on the camera lens before it went dark. 47 Marani colonists had landed on that green and beautiful world. 3 had made it back to orbit. They never spoke again. Now she stood before 12 humans who wanted to go there. "You must understand," she said, her feline ears pressed flat against her skull. "This is not a warning we give lightly. Verdant 6 has killed representatives from 17 different species." Danny Webb, the leader of the human team, leaned forward in his chair. He was a man of average height with brown skin and a smile that seemed permanently stuck on his face. "Ambassador, we've read all the reports. Fascinating stuff. Those shadow cats hunt in packs of 20, right? And the acid serpents can spit up to 30 meters." Holith blinked. "Yes, that is correct. These are reasons to stay away." "And the carnivorous plants," added Priya Sharma, the team's wildlife specialist. She was a slim woman with dark hair tied back in a practical bun. "They form underground networks and can coordinate attacks across hundreds of meters." "That's incredible." Director Ulin, who oversaw the quarantine from his position in planetary safety, let out a wet gurgling sound. The amphibian Dreth was not used to this reaction. Usually, when he presented the mortality statistics, visiting species turned pale or green or whatever color indicated terror in their biology. "The fatality rate is 94%, Ulin said slowly, as if speaking to children. 94. Nearly everyone who lands on that planet dies. What happened to the other 6%? Asked Leo Fontaine, the team medic. He was an older man with gray at his temples and calm eyes. "They escaped before the wildlife found them. So nobody has actually tried to work with the animals," Leo said. Holith and Ulin exchanged glances. "Work with them?" The creatures of Verdant 6 were not partners. They were natural disasters with teeth and claws and poison. "Perhaps a visual reminder will help," Holith said. She activated the display screen behind her. The footage played. Shadow cats the size of earth tigers, but with 6 legs and fur that shifted colors to match their surroundings. A pack of them brought down a Kivin supply ship by melting through the hull. Acid serpents wrapped around fleeing colonists. Carnivorous plants dragged screaming victims underground. The humans watched in silence. When the footage ended, Holith expected fear. She expected the humans to thank her for the warning and return to their ship. She expected sanity. Instead, Anita Reyes, the team's young engineer, raised her hand. "Do we know what they eat? I mean, besides colonists. What's their natural diet?" "Their natural diet?" Holith repeated. "Yeah, like the shadow cats are clearly pack hunters, so they probably go after large herbivores. And the serpents look like they might be ambush predators. Do they have territories? How do they raise their young?" Holith felt her head spinning. "I do not see how this is relevant." "It's completely relevant," Danny said. He was still smiling. "Ambassador, Director, we really appreciate the warning. We understand the risks. Now, where do we sign the forms?" Ulin pulled up the liability waivers on his datapad. His webbed fingers trembled slightly. "These forms state that the Galactic Union bears no responsibility for your deaths. Your families cannot sue. Your government cannot claim damages. You will receive no rescue mission if things go wrong." "Understood," Danny said. "We will not come for you." "Got it. You will die alone on that planet, and your bodies will feed the very creatures that killed you." Danny took the datapad and signed his name with a flourish. "Director, on Earth we have a saying. Nothing ventured, nothing gained." One by one, the other 11 humans signed their names. Holith watched them with growing horror. These were not soldiers. They were scientists, researchers, the kind of people who should know better. "Why?" she finally asked. "Why would you do this?" Priya Sharma looked up from the datapad after adding her signature. Her eyes were warm and calm. "Ambassador, my grandmother grew up in a village in India where tigers sometimes wandered through the streets. My grandfather's family in Africa lived near elephants that could crush a house. Humans have always lived alongside dangerous animals. We're good at it. You're good at dying, Holith said. Sometimes, Priya admitted. But mostly, we're good at making friends. The human ship departed 2 hours later. Hollis stood at the observation deck and watched it grow smaller against the green and blue swirl of Verdant. Sixth, Ulin joined her. I have contacted our memorial services department. They will begin preparing the ceremonies. 12 ceremonies, Hollis said quietly. It seems efficient to do them all at once. They stood in silence for a long moment. Below them, the quarantine planet turned slowly, beautiful and deadly, and full of things that wanted to kill everything that moved. Do you think any of them will survive? Holith asked. Ulin's large eyes blinked sideways. No, but I confess, I am curious to see how long they last. On the planet's surface, the shadow cats lifted their heads as the human ship entered the atmosphere. New prey had arrived. They began to hunt. 3 days on Verdant, 6, and not a single human had died. Up on Station Harmony 7, the monitoring team did not know what to make of this. The humans had set up camp in a clearing near a river. Their shelters were simple fabric tents. Their weapons remained packed in storage containers. Instead of building walls or digging trenches, they had spent their first 2 days walking through the jungle and taking notes. Are they trying to die? Asked one of the Dreth monitors. Perhaps they're simply very slow prey, suggested another. On the planet's surface, Danny Webb was having the time of his life. The jungle around him glowed with bioluminescent plants in blues and purples and soft greens. Insects the size of his fist buzzed past, their wings catching the light like living jewels. Every direction offered something new and wonderful. Moving on the left, Priya said quietly. Danny stopped walking. He did not reach for a weapon. He did not run. He simply sat down on a fallen log and looked at the ground. The shadow cats emerged from the undergrowth like smoke becoming solid. Their color-shifting fur rippled as they moved, making them hard to count. 8, 10, maybe 15. They circled the 2 humans with the patient grace of professional killers. They're testing us, Priya whispered. She sat down next to Danny, keeping her movements slow and calm. Yep, what do we do? Nothing. The shadow cats circled closer. Their eyes were golden and intelligent. One of them, larger than the others, approached Danny directly. Its breath was hot on his face. Its teeth were very long and very sharp. Danny yawned that IT was not a real yawn. His heart was beating fast enough to burst. But he had worked with Earth predators for 15 years, and he knew that fear was a trigger. Fear meant prey. Comment something else entirely. The large shadow cat sniffed him. Its nose touched his cheek, his neck, his shoulder. Then it made a sound somewhere between a growl and a purr and backed away. The pack continued circling for another 10 minutes. Then one by one, they faded back into the jungle. They'll be back, Danny said. I'm counting on it. They found the injured juvenile 2 hours later. The IT was smaller than the adults, maybe the size of an earth collie. Its fur flickered weakly between gray and green, a sign of illness or stress. It limped badly on its front right leg, and when the humans approached, it did not end. IT could not run. The pack left it behind, Priya said. Her voice was soft with sadness. Too slow, too weak. Natural selection. Danny studied the young creature. It watched them with huge golden eyes, waiting for death. That was what it expected. That was what always came for the weak and the injured. Priya pulled dried meat from her pack. She crouched down, staying low, making herself small and unthreatening. She placed the meat on the ground halfway between herself and the juvenile. Nothing happened for a long moment. Then the juvenile crawled forward. Its injured leg dragged behind it. Its nose twitched at the unfamiliar smell of the meat. When it finally took the food, it did not look away from Priya's face. Good, she said softly. Good. That's a good start. Leo Fontaine arrived at the scene 20 minutes later with his medical kit. He took one look at the juvenile's leg and shook his head. Infected wound. Probably from a fight. The pack abandoned it because it couldn't keep up. Can you fix it? I can try. What followed was the strangest surgery any of them had ever performed. Anita Reyes distracted the juvenile with more food while Leo cleaned the wound. The creature hissed and snapped at him twice, but Priya kept talking to it in a low, steady voice, and slowly it relaxed. On Earth, Leo said as he worked, we used to do this with wolves. Thousands of years ago. The weak ones, the injured ones, the ones the pack didn't want. We fed them. We healed them. Eventually, they became dogs. You think we can do that here? Anita asked. Leo finished bandaging the wound and stepped back. The juvenile immediately crawled toward Priya, pressing its body against her legs. I think we just did. By nightfall, the juvenile refused to leave the camp. It followed Priya everywhere, sleeping outside her tent and growling softly at anyone who came too close. Danny watched from across the fire. We need to name it. We shouldn't name it, Priya said. It's a wild animal. Naming it creates attachment. You carried it 3 kilometers to camp on your back. I think attachment has already happened. Priya looked down at the creature curled against her feet. Its breathing was steady now, no longer the rapid panting of pain and fear. Its fur had settled into a soft gray color, relaxed and calm. Biscuit, she said finally. Danny raised an eyebrow. Biscuit, she looks like my grandmother's cat. That cat was also named Biscuit. Up on Station Harmony 7, Ambassador Holleth watched the footage in complete disbelief. The humans had been on the planet for 3 days. They had encountered a pack of shadow cats, the most feared predators on Verdant 6. And now one of those cats was sleeping at their feet like a pet. This is impossible, she said. Director Ullin did not answer. He was too busy calculating how long it would take for the adult shadow cats to return and eat everyone, but he would be wrong about that too. The rock slide came without warning. One moment George Obie was collecting mineral samples near the cliff face. The next moment, half the cliff was falling down around him. He dove behind a boulder and covered his head. When the dust settled, he was bruised but alive. The path back to camp was completely blocked. That was when he heard the hissing. Something was trapped under the rocks. George approached carefully, pushing aside smaller stones until he found the source. An acid serpent, nearly 2 meters long, lay pinned beneath a fallen slab. Its scales were bright orange with black stripes, and its head moved weakly, tracking his movements. The logical thing to do was walk away. Acid serpents were Class 6 dangerous. Their venom could dissolve metal. One bite would be the end of him. George sat down next to the trapped creature and started moving rocks. Easy now, he said in his deep, calm voice. I'm not going to hurt you. Just going to get you out of there. The serpent watched him with eyes like black glass. It did not spit. It did not bite. Perhaps it was too weak. Perhaps it was curious about this strange, soft creature that was trying to help instead of harm. 6 hours later, George freed the serpent. It lay on the warm rocks, exhausted, its breathing shallow. He could see now that it was young, not fully grown, and it had probably been hunting when the slide caught it. George pulled a water container from his pack and carefully poured some near the serpent's head. It drank greedily. Then it looked up at him with those dark eyes and made a sound he had never heard in any recording. A soft chirp, almost like a question. You're welcome, he said. When George finally found his way back to camp the next morning, the serpent followed him. It rode on his shoulders like a scarf, its head resting near his ear. And when the other team members saw him emerge from the jungle, they did not know whether to scream or laugh. George, Danny said slowly, is that an acid serpent? Her name is Noodles. You named it Noodles. She likes it. Noodles chirped in agreement. Meanwhile, Yuki Tanaka was having her own adventure in the eastern swamps. The botanist had found something remarkable. A juvenile carnivorous plant, separated from its network, struggling to survive alone. Most people would have run. The adult plants could grab a full-grown Marani and drag it underground in seconds. But this one was small, barely the size of a basketball, and its tendrils waved weakly in the air like a drowning thing reaching for help. Yuki built a portable terrarium from spare equipment. She filled it with soil from the swamp and carefully transplanted the little plant inside. It grabbed at her fingers once, but the grip was weak, more curious than threatening. You're just a baby, she said, lost and alone. I know how that feels. She discovered that the plant responded to sound. When she hummed, its tendrils swayed in rhythm. When she played music from her datapad, it seemed to dance. Within a week, she had trained it to recognize her voice. When she said her name, it would reach toward her gently, asking to be held. She called it Whiskers because its tendrils reminded her of a cat's face. Back at the main camp, Biscuit had grown from a frightened juvenile into a sleek young predator. But she showed no interest in hunting the humans. Instead, she followed Priya everywhere, sleeping in her tent at night and growling at any creature that came too close. "She thinks you're her mother," Leo said one evening. Priya scratched behind Biscuit's ears. The shadow cat's fur rippled with pleasure, shifting through shades of happy blue. "I think she just knows who her friends are." The team had been on Verdant 6 for 3 weeks now. Their collection had grown beyond anyone's expectations. Besides Biscuit, Noodles, and Whiskers, they had adopted a family of luminescent moths that nested in Anita's hair, a small armored creature that followed Leo like a puppy, and a bird-like thing with 6 wings that sang whenever Danny played his harmonica. Danny called a team meeting to discuss their findings. Every attack recorded in the historical archives was defensive, he explained, showing diagrams on his datapad. The colonists came with weapons. They saw threats everywhere. So the wildlife responded to that threat. "They attacked because they were afraid of us," Priya added. "Exactly. But when we showed up without weapons, without fear, the animals didn't know what to do with us. We weren't prey. We weren't predators. We were just new." Yuki held up her terrarium. Whiskers pressed against the glass, its tendrils waving at the gathered team. "These creatures aren't monsters. They're just animals. Complicated, dangerous animals, but animals nonetheless. They can learn. They can adapt. They can trust." On Station Harmony 7, Ambassador Holith demanded an emergency meeting with the Galactic Council. She showed them the latest footage. Humans walking through the jungle, surrounded by creatures that should be killing them. A shadow cat sleeping in a tent. An acid serpent riding on a man's shoulders. A carnivorous plant dancing to music. "This is impossible," Counselor Breath said. The insectoid Kivin leader clicked his mandibles in agitation. "These animals are class Omega dangerous. They cannot be tamed." And yet, Holith said quietly. The footage showed Priya Sharma sitting by a river, Biscuit curled up beside her, both of them watching the sunset together. "And yet," Holith repeated, "the humans have done exactly that." The council voted to send a delegation to investigate. They needed to see this impossibility with their own eyes. None of them were prepared for what they would find. The Galactic Council shuttle landed in the human camp like a nervous bird afraid of its own shadow. Ambassador Holith was the first to exit, wearing full protective armor and carrying 3 different emergency beacons. Behind her came Counselor Breath in his armored exoskeleton and Dr. Hellin, a young Marani scientist who had volunteered for this mission against her family's wishes. What they found made no sense. Danny Webb stood at the edge of the landing zone, waving cheerfully. Behind him, the camp spread out in organized chaos. Tents, equipment, research stations, and everywhere, creatures. Creatures that should be attacking. Creatures that should be killing. Creatures that were instead lounging in the sun like they owned the place. "Welcome to Verdant 6, Danny said. "Watch your step. Biscuit doesn't like sudden movements." Holith looked down. A shadow cat the size of a small horse lay directly in her path, watching her with golden eyes. Its fur shifted through warning colors of red and orange. "That is a shadow cat," Holith whispered. "That's Biscuit. She's friendly." Mostly. Priya Sharma appeared from one of the tents and said something to the massive predator. Biscuit yawned, showing teeth the length of Holith's fingers, then rolled over onto her side and closed her eyes. "She says you can pass now," Priya said. The delegation walked through the camp in stunned silence. They passed George Obi working on geological samples with an acid serpent draped around his neck like a scarf. They passed Yuki Tanaka feeding her dancing plant creature and humming a tune it seemed to recognize. They passed Anita Reyes surrounded by luminescent moths that flickered in response to her laughter. "This is a mass hallucination," Counselor Breath said. We are all dying of some neurotoxin, and this is our shared death dream. Counselor, Dr. Helen said softly. I don't think that's the case. She was staring at something beyond the main camp. A creature so large it made everything else look like toys. It was the size of a transport shuttle, covered in armored plates, with 6 legs and a head like a battering ram. A Class 9 threat. One of the most dangerous herbivores on Verdant. 6, known to crush anything that startled it. Leo Fontaine was sitting on its back, reading a book. That's Grumbles, Danny explained casually. We found him last week with an infected wound on his leg. Took us 3 days to earn enough trust to treat him. Now he follows us everywhere. You named it Grumbles, Holith said flatly. Because of the sound he makes when he's happy. Listen. On cue, the enormous creature made a sound like distant thunder, low and rumbling. Leo patted its armored head affectionately. This is impossible, Breath repeated. Danny's smile faded slightly. Counselor, with respect, everyone keeps saying that. But you're looking right at it. It's clearly not impossible. You just didn't know it was possible. Dr. Helen pulled out her scanning equipment and began taking readings. The results made her pause. Ambassador, these creatures show significantly reduced stress hormones compared to baseline data. They are calm, genuinely calm. Because they trust us, Priya said. She walked to Biscuit and sat down beside the shadow cat. Biscuit's eyes opened, and she made a soft sound almost like a purr. On Earth, we learned something very important a long time ago. Animals respond to our emotions. If we're afraid, they become afraid. If we're aggressive, they become aggressive. But if we're calm and kind, she reached out and scratched behind Biscuit's ears. The shadow cat's fur rippled through shades of happy blue. Then they learned to be calm and kind too. Ambassador Holith stood very still. She remembered the stories from her own world. Long ago, before her species reached the stars, the Mirani had kept companion animals, small furry creatures that lived in their homes and slept in their beds. But as the Mirani advanced technologically, they had left those old relationships behind. The companion animals became pests. Then they became extinct. We forgot, she said quietly. We forgot how to do this. Most species do, Danny said. Once you get advanced enough, you start seeing nature as something to control or avoid. You forget that you're part of it. You forget that connection is possible. Biscuit suddenly lifted her head. Her ears rotated toward the jungle, and her fur shifted to alert yellow. A low growl built in her throat. Something's coming, Priya said. Everyone in the camp stopped what they were doing. The alien delegation reached for their weapons. But the humans just watched and waited. From the jungle emerged another pack of shadow cats. Wild ones, a dozen adults, all of them focused on the camp with hungry interest. We should evacuate, Breath said urgently. Nobody moved. Biscuit rose to her feet. She was not as large as the wild adults, but she stood her ground. She walked toward the pack slowly, making no aggressive movements. When she reached the lead cat, a scarred female twice her size, she lowered her head in what looked like greeting. The 2 cats touched noses. They stood that way for a long moment. Then the wild pack leader made a strange sound, something between a bark and a whistle. From behind the adults came 2 small shapes. Juveniles. Thin, injured, struggling to keep up. Rejects. Just like Biscuit had been, Biscuit turned and looked at Priya. The question was clear. Yes, Priya said softly. Bring them home. The wild pack melted back into the jungle, leaving their weakest behind. Biscuit herded the 2 juveniles toward the camp, where Leo was already preparing his medical kit. Doctor. Helen watched with tears in her eyes. You've become a sanctuary. Without even trying. Danny shrugged. We were just trying to make friends. The rest happened naturally. That night, around a fire surrounded by creatures that had terrified the galaxy for 200 years, Ambassador Holith asked the question that had been burning in her mind since she arrived. How do you do it? How are you not afraid? Priya looked up at the stars visible through the jungle canopy. Biscuit's head rested in her lap. The 2 new juveniles slept nearby, full and warm for maybe the first time in their lives. We are afraid, she said. We're always afraid. But we learned a long time ago that fear doesn't have to stop us. Sometimes the scariest path leads to the best places. Hala thought about that for a long time. Dr. Helen refused to leave. When the diplomatic shuttle prepared to return to Station Harmony 7, she removed her protective armor and announced that she was staying for further research. Ambassador Holith tried to talk her out of it. Counselor Breath called her insane. But Dr. Helen had seen something that changed her understanding of the universe, and she needed to learn more. "Teach me," she said to the humans. "Show me how you do this." The lessons began the next morning. Danny took her to a quiet spot near the river, away from the camp. The jungle sounds surrounded them. Alien birds called in the trees. Something large moved through the undergrowth nearby. Dr. Helen's instincts screamed at her to run, but she forced herself to sit still. "The first lesson is the hardest," Danny said. "You have to accept that you might die." That does not sound like a lesson. That sounds like a warning. It's both. Every Marani colonist who landed on this planet came with the goal of surviving. They built walls. They carried weapons. They were so focused on not dying that they radiated fear like a signal beacon. And every predator on the planet heard that signal. So we brought our own deaths with us. In a way, yes. But humans learned something different. Danny picked up a small stone and rolled it between his fingers. 40,000 years ago, our ancestors lived alongside wolves. Wolves that could kill them easily. But instead of building walls and carrying spears everywhere, some of our ancestors tried something crazy. They shared their food. Dr. Helen's ears twitched. That seems unwise. It was unwise. Some of those ancestors probably got eaten, but the ones who survived created something new. A partnership. The wolves that accepted human friendship became dogs. They hunted with us, guarded our children, slept by our fires. And we did the same for them. You made them family. Exactly. Danny stood and offered his hand to help her up. "Now let's go meet Noodles." George Obi was waiting for them at his research station. Noodles was coiled around his shoulders as usual, her orange and black scales gleaming in the morning light. When she saw Dr. Helen, she raised her head and hissed. "Easy, girl," George said calmly. "This is a friend. How do you know she won't spit acid at me?" Dr. Helen asked, keeping her distance. "Because I've taught her what friend means. Watch." George reached into a pouch and pulled out a piece of dried fish. He held it up where Noodles could see it. "Helen," he said, pointing at the Marani scientist. "Friend." He gave Noodles the fish. The serpent ate the treat, then looked at Dr. Helen with new interest, curious instead of hostile. "Now you try," George said, handing Helen a piece of fish. Her hands trembled as she held up the food. Noodles watched her carefully, tongue flicking out to taste the air. Then, slowly, the serpent unwound from George's shoulders and approached Helen. Every instinct told her to run. Every memory of the old footage screamed that she was about to die. But she stood her ground and held out the fish. Noodles took it gently from her fingers. "Friend," George said again. Noodles made that chirping sound that Dr. Helen had heard before. It sounded like agreement. Over the following weeks, Dr. Helen learned more than she had in years of academic study. She learned how Yuki had trained Whiskers to respond to voice commands. She learned how Leo had earned Grumble's trust through patience and gentle care. She learned how even the wild shadow cats had begun to recognize the humans as something other than prey. "On my world," she told Priya one evening, "we have forgotten how to do this. We used to have companion animals thousands of years ago. Small furry creatures that lived with us, loved us. But as we advanced, we left them behind. We decided we were too civilized for such primitive relationships." Priya was brushing Biscuit's fur, something the shadow cat demanded every evening before sleep. "That's sad. I never thought so before. I thought it was progress. Now I see it was loss. It's not too late. Your people could learn again. We could teach you." Dr. Helen's heart felt strange, full in a way it had not felt in years. She watched Biscuit roll on her back so Priya could scratch her belly. This terrifying predator turned into a purring ball of contentment, and she understood something important. The galaxy had been wrong about danger. Danger was not something to be avoided or destroyed. Sometimes danger was just another form of potential. Potential for friendship. Potential for family. Potential for love. Ambassador Holith has requested regular reports, Dr. Helen said. She wants to understand what's happening here. I think she's beginning to remember what her people lost. Good, Priya said, because I have a feeling this is just the beginning. She was right. 2 days later, an official communication arrived from the Galactic Council. They were sending a larger delegation. Scientists from 12 different species wanted to study the human methods. Diplomats wanted to discuss reclassifying Verdant. 6. And Ambassador Holith had a personal request. There's a world in Marani space, she wrote. A world we abandoned centuries ago because of its dangerous wildlife. I want to know if humans would be willing to help us try again. Danny read the message to the team that night. Around them, their growing collection of deadly pets lounged in peaceful contentment. Biscuit and her 2 adopted siblings. Noodles and the other serpents she had attracted to the camp. Whiskers and the small garden of carnivorous plants that now swayed together when Yuki played music. Grumbles, sleeping nearby, so large he created his own weather pattern. What do you think? Danny asked. Ready to teach the galaxy how to make friends? The answer was unanimous on the distant station. Ambassador Holith looked at old photographs of the companion animals her ancestors had once loved. Small furry faces frozen in time. Eyes full of trust and devotion. She was ready to remember. 6 months after 12 humans landed on a death world with nothing but hope and dried meat. The docking bay of Station Harmony 7 was cleared of all non-essential personnel. Warning lights flashed. Emergency teams stood ready. Every camera on the station pointed at the massive airlock doors. The humans were coming home. And they were not coming alone. Ambassador Holith stood behind reinforced glass with the other diplomats. Her hands were clasped tightly in front of her, and her feline ears twitched with nervous energy. Beside her, Director Ullin had prepared emergency containment protocols for 17 different threat scenarios. None of those protocols would be necessary. The airlock opened, and Danny Webb walked through first, still wearing that impossible smile. Behind him came the rest of the team, and behind them came the creatures. Biscuit led the way, now fully grown and magnificent, her color-shifting fur settled into a calm blue. She wore a collar that read Service Animal in 6 galactic languages. Behind her walked her 2 adopted siblings, smaller but equally impressive. George Obi carried Noodles around his shoulders as always, but now she was not alone. 3 other acid serpents had joined their group over the months, all of them trained to recognize the difference between friend and food. Yuki Tanaka wore a specially designed backpack with whiskers inside, the carnivorous plant's tendrils waving happily at the gathered crowd. Around her feet, a dozen smaller plants hopped along in portable containers, each one trained and gentle. And then came the others. 43 creatures in total. Shadow cats on leashes. Serpents in carriers. Flying things that circled the humans in protective patterns. Armored beasts that walked in formation like trained soldiers. The station residents watched from behind glass with expressions of pure disbelief. "This is impossible," someone whispered. It had become the most common phrase in the Galactic Union over the past 6 months. Counselor Breath stepped forward. His mandibles clicked nervously, but he had agreed to make the official greeting. "On behalf of the Galactic Council, we welcome you back. Your achievement is unprecedented." "Thank you, Counselor," Danny said. "We're happy to be here. The creatures are a bit stressed from the journey, so if you could keep the crowd back for a few minutes while they settle down." "Of course." Holith could not stop staring at Biscuit. The shadow cat was watching her too, those golden eyes intelligent and curious. 6 months ago, this creature would have killed her without hesitation. Now it sat calmly beside its human partner, waiting for instructions. "May I approach?" Holith asked. Priya nodded. "Slowly. Let her sniff you first." Holith walked forward on trembling legs. Every step felt like walking toward her own death. But she had spent 6 months watching the footage, reading the reports, learning about what the humans had accomplished. She had spent 6 months remembering what her people had lost. She stopped in front of Biscuit and crouched down to the creature's eye level. Biscuit sniffed her face, her neck, her hands. Her fur flickered through colors. Uncertain yellow, warning orange. Then, slowly, settling blue, Biscuit bumped her head against Holith's palm. "Hello, beautiful," Holith whispered, tears forming in her eyes. Behind her, Dr. Hellin was crying too. The young scientist had returned to the station ahead of the team to prepare the receiving area. But seeing the creatures here, in this sterile metal environment, made their achievement feel real in a way it had not before. "Ambassador," Danny said, "about your request." Holith looked up. "Yes, the team has discussed it. We would be honored to help your people reconnect with the wildlife on your abandoned world. We'll need time to prepare, and we'll need your people to trust us when things get scary. But we believe it can be done." "I believe it too," Holith said. She stood, still stroking Biscuit's head. "I have spent my entire career believing that civilization meant separating ourselves from nature. I was wrong. Other species were already lining up with similar requests. A representative from the aquatic zooloi wanted help with their ocean world's aggressive marine life. A delegation from the Kivin wanted to discuss their planet's burrowing predators. Even the isolationist Dreth had begun asking questions about Earth's wolves and dogs. Danny called his team together for a moment away from the crowd. They stood in a circle surrounded by their collection of deadly pets. These creatures that had been feared for centuries and were now purring and chirping and rumbling with contentment. "The council is going to reclassify Verdant 6, he told them. "They're calling it a human-assisted wildlife preserve. They want us to establish a permanent base there and continue our work." "What about the other requests?" Priya asked. "Holith's world? The Zoloi oceans? We'll get to all of them. Eventually. The galaxy has spent thousands of years running from nature. It's going to take time to help them find their way back." Leo Fontaine looked down at Grumbles. The massive creature was too large for the station, so he was waiting in a specially constructed habitat in the cargo bay. But Leo had set up a video link so they could see each other. "We came here expecting to die. We ended up starting a revolution. A gentle revolution," Yuki said, adjusting whiskers in her backpack. "The best kind." Danny agreed that a young Marani child had somehow slipped past the security barriers. She stood a few meters away, staring at Biscuit with huge eyes. Her mother rushed forward to pull her back, but Priya held up a hand. "It's okay. Biscuit, be gentle." The shadow cat approached the child slowly, her movements careful and controlled. The child did not run. Children rarely did, unless adults taught them to be afraid. Biscuit sniffed the child's face. The child giggled. Then Biscuit bumped her head against the child's small hand, just as she had with Holith, an invitation to connection. The child scratched behind Biscuit's ears. Biscuit's fur turned the happiest shade of blue anyone had ever seen. Holith watched with tears streaming down her face. This was what her people had lost. This was what the galaxy had forgotten. Not just the companion animals, but the courage to reach out. The willingness to be vulnerable. The understanding that connection requires risk. "Ambassador," Danny said, appearing beside her. "We've received word about another world. Apparently, it has something called death flowers. They shoot poison needles at anything that moves." Holith wiped her eyes. "That sounds horrifying. It sounds like a challenge." Danny's smile was as bright as ever. "I wonder if they like to dance. Yuki could probably figure out a way to train them. You're going to try to befriend poison-shooting flowers. We're going to try to befriend everything. That's kind of our thing." Holith laughed, surprising herself. 6 months ago, she would have called this man insane. Now she understood that he was something else entirely. He was human, and humans, it turned out, were exactly what the galaxy needed. In the cargo bay, Grumbles rumbled happily as Leo played him a video of Earth's elephants. On the station's main deck, shadow cats played with children while their parents watched in amazement. In her backpack, Whiskers danced to music only she could hear. Danny looked out the station window at the stars spreading endlessly in every direction. Somewhere out, there were worlds full of creatures waiting to be understood. Creatures that had never known kindness. Creatures that had never been offered friendship. "Well," he said quietly, "I wonder if they like belly rubs." The adventure was just beginning.